All right, good evening, everybody. This is Scott Welle, and on the other side of the screen, you've got Adam Lax. Adam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great, Scott.
Thanks a lot for taking the time, and thanks for joining us. Adam is a registered dietitian in the Palm Beach, Florida area. So anybody that's followed me for a while, you know I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I've already told Adam I'm going to go move in. I'm going to live with him this winter, as nobody wants to be stuck here in Minnesota. But more than anything, I wanted to bring him on board here to share some of his insights with you on his message behind nutrition. Obviously, he's got the credentials and the experience behind it. But Adam, why don't we start out where you just tell people a little bit about, your story, how you got involved as a registered dietitian, and kind of your experience behind all of this.
Scott, I am very passionate about being a registered dietitian because it all started with my grandmother who gave me vitamins when I was 10 years old. And I asked her why. She said, I said so. And most of the time, I listened to what my grandmother said versus what my parents said. For me, being a registered dietitian, I've been doing this over 21 years. I have certifications in both adult as well as adolescent and childhood obesity. And half of my career was in the food service industry, and half of my career has been clinical and in private practice. So I always say, if I haven't done it, I made it or ate it. So, and I am the fun back in the food dietitian. I make food fun because food should not be a drudgery. Food has many meanings to people, especially with culture, and we have a diverse population that we can't just put everything in one bowl or one can for everyone. Mm-hmm. People in the Midwest eat different than the people in the South. And with our ethnic melting pot that we live in the United States of America, we have to be amenable for other cultures, because not everybody eats hamburgers or chicken the way we make it. Mm-hmm. So we have to be more approachable with food, because food is love, food is culture, and you can't get arrested for eating too much.
That's a great line. And just to let everybody in on it, I met Adam, what would have been a couple of months ago, at an entrepreneur speaking conference out in California. And part of the reason that we're doing this is I loved your energy from minute one. I loved the little lines that you had, such as, putting the fun back into food and different things like that. And I think that's very necessary for people these days, because you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be drudgery. It should be something that we look at in a positive light. So with that being said, eating well, cleaning up your diet, having solid core nutrition, whatever you want to call it, can sometimes be very daunting for people. And a lot of people don't even know where to begin. So you've obviously been doing this for a while, and I would like for you to share your insight on, when you get somebody new in front of you, what's the starting point? What's kind of the first thing that you go over with them as far as getting them just started on the right track to making some progress with their daily nutrition?
Most people know a lot about nutrition because of the vast resources that they might read about nutrition. Of course, what's out on the internet and in books and from different resources. And I go based on what they already know versus starting from square one. And then I decipher and I get rid of all the myths that might be involved in their old thinking that's holding them back. And I just clear those things up where it's like, well, it's okay because you just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I said, our field is science and evidence-based, and that's what makes a registered dietitian the nutrition expert in the field. And there's only 72,000 plus registered dietitians in the country. Mm-hmm. And it's not a lot. And we have, 375 million people in our country.
Right.
So I have a lot of people to help out there, and I'm just one person. So thank you, number one, for letting me share my message with your clients, because We have to share the message. And the thing that I want people to know is be mindful versus mindless of their eating habits. Food starts with a thought. Food starts here before it goes here or here. If it doesn't smell good or it doesn't taste good or it doesn't look good, it won't taste good and then it won't go in the pie hole. So that's the thing. Food always starts with a thought. So mindful eating versus mindless eating will create a positive outcome.
Sure. It makes perfect sense. You brought up myths before, a lot of myths that people have regarding nutrition. Can you expand on that just for a little bit? What are some of the really common myths that you see with people?
Well, I find myths are connected to people's cultures at most. And I know my grandmother had myths about certain things, and she lived to 97 years old. So I think some of her myths were science-based and she just didn't know it.
Sure.
And we have to go back to the science part, and you, Scott, with your training, you know what protein, carbs, and fat are. They are the basic nutrients and building blocks that run our body. Our bodies we actually create machines modeled after the human body. So that's how I teach my clients is keep it simple. Take care of your structure. It's either a church, it's either a mosque, it's a synagogue, and it's your holy temple. It has nothing to do with religion. It's just we need to reinforce versus pile things on the structure, because when you pile things on the structure, the basic structure gets weak. So that relieves a lot of the mythological thinking about nutrition. When you keep it simple and you teach in basics of threes, and know that, hey, would you put crappy gas in your car for optimum performance? You ran how many marathons, Scott? You had to put optimum premium fuel in your body to have the stamina for it to run the way it was. Now, there's no myths involved in genetics because everyone has their own genetic makeup. However, the human body works in the same premise. It's been like that for a while. So when we simplify the science for people and they can understand, it's like, now I get it. I have to put good fuel in my car so it runs. My arms and legs are the wheels. The heart is the engine. Your water pump is hydration. And the cooling system. And as you are swallowing that water, it's so pertinent. So myths need simplicity for it to be understood. That's how I do it.
Sure. Now, one thing that I wanted to touch on certainly was food psychology. And obviously being a psychology major, there's psychology that goes into everything. But you tied it in perfectly before, where you said it starts here and then here and here. What I see with a lot of people is basically an unhealthy, I would call it, relationship with food, where you can't have one piece of candy, you have the whole bag, or you can't have one glass of wine, or you drink the whole bottle. And then having all of that, or having too much of something to an extreme, then all of a sudden leads to feelings of guilt, feelings of just negative feelings towards yourself, which then in turn can lead to restriction and whatnot on the back end that only takes you so far when you get to a point where then all of a sudden, you do the same thing. And it's kind of this reoccurring pattern or this recurring vicious cycle. So from a food psychology standpoint, so when you deal with people's thinking behind food and really where it starts, do you have any insight on kind of how you start that process with people as far as just how they think about food?
Well, I ask the questions, do they know when they're hungry? And do they know when they're full? And that goes based on what they call satiety or satiation. And the human brain will shut off when it's satisfied and it has enough. However, if there's other psychological challenges, if there's emotional eating involved, which you talked about a vicious cycle. And people think by eating will quell the whatever they're going through at the moment. It could be depression. It could be just a whole sort of things that it's a bottomless abyss, and it never gets fulfilled. And then it becomes an addiction. So that's a whole different realm. But keeping it simple as far as being satiated, ask them when they are hungry and when they are full. And the key thing is to stop right before they are full and to eat at the signs of hunger. And for me, when I teach satiation, I talk about eating the diabetic way because everything turns to glucose or blood sugar. So I eat like a diabetic and I'm not. And I just take those nutrients that we talked about and put them in a proportion that satisfies the brain. So of the three main nutrients, they all turn to sugar. You want one that's the slowest burning and that will last longest, and that's my favorite, is protein.
Okay. So just expand on that just a little bit more for people that might not know it. I mean, still keeping it simple, but what do you mean when you say eat like a diabetic? I know you just said protein, but just elaborate on that a little more.
Well, be it that if someone was diabetic, they have challenges controlling their blood sugar. And it's due to abnormal productions of insulin, which is a hormone in the body, which regulates your blood sugar. So half the challenge for those type of clients is they need to moderate their carbohydrate intake, which is the fastest burning fuel, and it turns to sugar most rapidly. So knowing that when we eat a lot of carbs, if you weren't diabetic, you're hungry in about 30 minutes or 45 minutes. However, when you eat protein, it takes longer for it to turn to energy, which is blood sugar, and which will last longer, which means you won't have to eat as much. So it shuts the brain off as far as it's being satiated, and you won't be hungry. So when you do everything in proportion of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, we want more protein, less carbs, less fat. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Absolutely. And the next area I want to go into is just a little bit on you can call it food allergies, food sensitivities. You know, there's a lot coming out these days, whether it's soy or wheat or gluten or dairy, whatever it might be. For people who may not have the resources or means or access to be able to go in and maybe get their blood tested for some of these different food allergies or food sensitivities, is there anything that you use to really help people identify what they may? I think a lot of people are missing that link between sometimes what they put in their body and the way that they ultimately feel and how they perform on a daily basis. But is there anything that you go through to kind of target some of these different things that are really coming to the forefront these days?
Well, without any clinical testing, the best way is to notice any kind of reactions or symptoms that might be caused by a particular food. And some of the most common is lactose, and peanut, and gluten. Gluten sensitivities is becoming more common these days, and that could be in a serious form of what they call celiac disease. And that's why a lot of things are labeled gluten-free. And gluten, for those that don't know what gluten is a protein in wheat. And we have an enzyme in our body called glutaminase that breaks it down. Same thing with lactose. Lactose is milk sugar. So the enzyme that breaks it down in the human body is lactase. So if we're not producing enough of these enzymes, we're not able to tolerate. And then we experience symptoms of bloatedness, gas, some gastrointestinal discomforts, and just very uncomfortable feelings. Now, a food allergy versus a sensitivity, an allergy can cause what they call an anaphylactic reaction that could become life-threatening, like peanuts. A peanut allergy can become life-threatening. So when that's involved, then definitely seek medical attention
Hmm.
to definitely get clinically tested. But the answer to your question, as far as the sensitivities, just notice if you're going to consume or if you've been consuming a lot of these products, we do this. Uh, the remedy would be to do an elimination diet or an elimination regimen. We just eliminate it and see if we're experiencing
Hmm.
uh, the same symptoms. And for if you say, well, is that all you have to do? Well, it's probably the safest way
Hmm.
to see and to improve upon your nutrition. These sensitivities can come over time
Hmm.
through age and through genetics.
Hmm.
And also, the good news is they can be outgrown.
Hmm. Is there a period of time that you need to eliminate something and then reintroduce it to notice whether you have an effect from that given food?
Uh, it's a good question. If you want to test the waters, and if you're gonna, I would say I couldn't really give you a time frame
Mhm.
on when to reintroduce something. Just remember the psychological and the physiological discomfort that you went through
Right.
by get right. So, I, just just from a remembrance, if you really want to go through and see, you have to reintroduce it. I would say 6 months,
Hmm.
a year,
Hmm.
to see if you really had a real true sensitivity to those
Wow.
foods.
Okay.
It could take longer. It
Sure.
really could.
Okay. I was just curious. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so.
Well, I don't. I can't. Everybody I have to treat as an individual,
Sure.
and especially with milk or lactose sensitivities, there are the options like you said, soy,
Hmm.
rice, almond milk, which are really not milks because they don't have a lot of protein in them. For milk, soy is a higher protein source than regular animal milk,
Hmm.
cow's milk. There's also goats and sheep milk too.
Hmm.
Um, but there are things that you can use like lactate pills if you want to continue to consume dairy products. Some people might not tolerate milk, but they can tolerate cheese and yogurt
Sure.
and ice cream.
And we all love ice cream, right?
Oh yes, yes. We're not allergic to ice cream.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
nobody is.
Yeah.
All right, one more question I want to ask you before we wrap this up. You deal with childhood obesity, correct?
Yes.
So this is more of a philosophical question. Yeah, I've seen a lot of these different documentaries, whether it's Weight of the Nation, A Place at the Table, Hungry for Change, Forks and Knives, all these different things. It's obviously it's obesity has been labeled as an epidemic now, and it's a very real problem here in our nation. I'm curious to hear from your point of view what you ultimately think can be done, and I always like to hear people's viewpoints on this. Where the starting point is as far as reversing this trend in the epidemic of obesity just in this country in general.
It all starts with the parents.
Hmm.
All starts with the child is not making the food decisions.
Hmm.
The parents are, and families don't eat as families anymore because of the two income necessity of the family to make a living. So either mom and dad are working and they don't have time to go to the grocery store and they settle. The word is settle. And the thing, Scott, is we don't settle anymore. We can't settle anymore. I will not settle
Hmm.
when a parent tells me, oh, I had to go buy a frozen meal.
Hmm.
No, that's unacceptable.
Hmm.
It's unacceptable. So eating as a family is key to a better outcome
Hmm.
because number one, uh, the child gets to number one have a say
Hmm.
versus someone left you a note in the fridge saying, "Here, microwave this," or whatever the case may be. And not all families or children have the family structure like the American, the typical American family.
Sure.
But in general, it all starts with the choice of the parents. What I what I encourage parents to do is, number one, allow the child to make shopping choices when they do go shopping. Incorporate some kind of food preparation. Make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
The fun back in the food kid.
Mm-hmm.
Let them play around. Let them bake a cake. Let them throw flour all over the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
But at least they're getting involved. They're smiling. And they say, can I do this again, Mom? Can I do this again? But show them the proper way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a forgotten love. Is to, I remember, I guess my mom's biggest fear was I was going to leave the toaster on, that I was going to burn the house down. So that could be fears of parents not wanting their kids to cook.
Mm-hmm.
So I really encourage even games of food. And there are some food games out there that incorporate food choices. And I remember when the Easy Bake Oven came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Easy Bake Oven.
A little bit.
So not to say that the cake that they made was a healthy choice, but at least they got involved.
Mm-hmm.
To, dietitians didn't become dietitians until they were home economists. Mm-hmm. And home ec was, I had to learn how to cook first at a young age. So my message to you and your clients and the rest of the obese and overweight nation is, make it fun, take the time, and don't settle.
Right. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate on this because I guarantee some of the people out there, I get this all the time, are saying, well, that sounds all well and good to be able to cook and to be able to make it fun and to be able to do these things, but I don't have enough time. I mean, I know I personally think it's the single biggest excuse out there, but what do you say to people when they come back to you and they say, I don't have enough time to be cooking, I just have to do this?
Well, it's unfortunately, it's the parents' self-limiting belief. And if you counsel the parents to say, listen, okay, tell me your schedule in a day and I'll find an hour for you. You could break it down. I just dealt with a client, the same thing. There's 24 hours in a day. What won't you do for your child? What won't you do for your child? If you had to take your child to the doctor for a hypertensive episode because they're obese, you'll take the time. You'll miss work. Yeah. So, as you said, Scott, now I'm getting a little passionate about this.
That's good.
Horse hockey. I'll be horse hockey. It's that's the G-rated version. It's all about excuses, and we don't have to settle. And doing it in a diplomatic way with the parents. Say, listen, Mrs. Smith, can I call you Patty? Patty, listen, there is the time. You might be tired, but you know what? By you taking that hour out of the day will prevent a doctor's visit. Showing them the end result versus what's really staring them in their face, that it's not about time. It's about their own self-limiting beliefs.
Awesome. Well, last thing, I always want people to have at least one action item or one take-home point that they can get from these. I know that you are chock full of good lines that people can remember. So as far as the listeners out there, what is one piece of information that when they wake up tomorrow morning, they can immediately use to help their nutrition and their food choices going forward?
Well, I think you had heard this one at the seminar that we were at, and it's really fitting. Is plan your day around your meals, not your meals around your day. Because not that I want people to think about food, but a person with a plan is planning to win. Those who have no plans will plan to fail. It's just like when you were going to run your marathon, and I'll put it back on to you. You had a plan. You stuck to your plan, and your outcome was great. So the chances and the probability of those having a plan their day around their meals. Okay, I'm going to get up early. I'm going to make a healthy lunch, and then for their lunchtime meal, okay, I know where there's a great place to get a salad with a grilled chicken breast and unsweetened iced tea, and then I'll call the wife and say, listen, it's my turn to cook. I'll stop at the store and I'll pick up some fresh ingredients, and we're going to have a great whole wheat pasta dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I just planned your meal. And it's all about communication, Scott. Communicating that they are planning their day around the meals, not the meals around the day.
Mm-hmm. You sound so much like me sometimes. It's scary, but
But you have more hair.
Yes. You're
Yes,
doing all right, though.
Youth has its advantages.
All right. So, if anybody wants to contact you, let people know how they can get a hold of you, how they can get in touch with you if they so choose.
I have a website. It's called infinityweightmanagement.com. And you can email me personally at adam@infinityweightmanagement.com. Or you can call my office at 954-292-5625. Or you can contact Scott Welle, and he knows where to find me.
Well, we sound like an infomercial, man.
Well, we are colleagues, and
Hey, we're making the world a better place one day at a time. So,
absolutely.
to everybody out there, I will put Adam's contact information actually below this video, links to it if you want to contact him from there. So, Adam, on behalf of all of my clients, everybody on my email list, and everybody viewing this video, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your insightful knowledge, and keep rocking it out. Keep making the world a better place, and have a great night. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Scott. It was my pleasure.
All right, take care.